everybody.
Hey.
Where did my voice go?
Hello.
I lost my voice, too busy shouting notes at everybody yesterday.
No.
Thank you for joining us, you cast, and also anybody out there who's watching. We kind of threw this together because we weren't sure if it was going to happen. So we're here. We're here to do a little talk back because the Taming of the Shrew, as you know, we did yesterday at Heritage Hill State Historical Park, which so we also didn't know that was going to happen. So this has been quite a different kind of performance and rehearsal process. So I thought it would be really fun to do a little talk back for it. We actually had wanted to do a talk back for it, even if, you know, COVID hadn't happened and we could be in person. And I think it's just a nice way for other people who are watching to ask questions, learn more, and just share a little bit more about our experiences and what we learned and what we loved and everything. So I wish we could have everybody, but that would be a lot of people to have on screen. So we've got Katie with us who played Tranio, Lyle who played Gremio, who like fooled us all when he joined this because he shaved and we didn't recognize him. Will, who played Petruchio, Emily, who played Kate, and Teresa, who played Baptista. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you all feeling post-show?
Tired.
I was horrible all
Tired.
day. Tired. Walking around in my pajamas all day wanting chocolate.
Yeah. I think I literally took like 3 separate naps today.
Yeah, I definitely slept till 11 a.m. this morning. So,
I mean, I didn't get home till almost like 4:30, I think, is when Carolyn and I finished talking. So,
Yeah, we were talking for a really long time. The good old Midwestern goodbye.
Yep. I was at my car for half an hour of that, and we were just talking.
Wow.
Quick story. We have our 3-year-old grandson here, and I came out and had shaved my beard off, and he made me turn around to see if it was behind me somewhere. Where'd it go?
Oh, that's precious.
Love it. So anyone who's watching, I do see we do have people watching, so that's nice. If you have any questions about the show, about rehearsals, anything, feel free to pop them in the comments.
About Kenneth.
Sorry?
About Kenneth. We have Kenneth with us.
Yes, we do have Kenneth if you want to learn more about Bill's cat. But I have some questions that I think it would be really great to hear from answers from the actors about. So my first question, I would love to know what your experiences with Shakespeare have been, and if, you know, doing Shrew now has kind of, how that's changed or how that's made you think differently about Shakespeare. I just love hearing the different Shakespearean backgrounds, because I don't think I really know everyone. So go for it, friends.
As a non-theater major, my only experience with Shakespeare was 41 years ago at GB playing County Paris, who loved Juliet and who was spurned by her. Kind of familiar for this show.
Typecast.
From that time to this time, I had that image of Shakespeare as being this holier than thou, this untouchable, this city on a hill. And we took it down to a more human, more fun, more realistic level in a heightened way. And I really enjoyed that.
I was a theater and an English major, so I studied a lot of Shakespeare, read a lot of Shakespeare. I think I was assigned to read Romeo and Juliet every year for about 6 years in a row. So know that one backwards and forwards. But as far as acting, I was in As You Like It in college. I had literally one line, and was essentially like set dressing. We also, I think it was my freshman or sophomore year, they did The Tempest, so we studied that as well. And any chance I had to go see Shakespeare when it was performed somewhere, I would go. As far as opportunities to perform it since college, there really haven't been many. So Midsummer last summer and Taming of the Shrew this summer have been my only opportunities to be fully involved in a production, more than one line as a forest person and As You Like It. So,
Do you remember what your line was?
oh my goodness.
That's a great line.
It was,
Yeah, that says it all.
That's my favorite Shakespeare quote.
yes, I'm trying to think of it. I remember I had to say something, and then the guy, he was like, the old philosopher says like, oh, and he who will not keep quiet. And it was because I like said my line. I like annoy him. That's the whole point of my line, is to annoy this guy. Darn it. Or did I not even have a line? I think another guy had it, and I had to say it once because he missed his cue and wasn't on stage. Oh, and he got in so much trouble. The director came back at intermission and just like, that's right, I didn't even have a line, you guys. That's a misnomer. I filled in on the line because he didn't show up. But how precious, my dad memorized every action that I did on stage and then told it to me after the show to prove that he had been watching.
That's so
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was like, I loved when you sat down and you took the grapes and you held a wine glass and talked to your friend.
Oh God.
So that's my
It
limit.
doesn't matter. My daughter is on stage.
Exactly.
That's fantastic, Katie.
Mhm.
You didn't even have a line.
No, I don't think I did, now that you say that.
That's excellent. Excellent.
So I'll go. So I have actually never studied Shakespeare. Actually, this year at school, I'm going to be a junior at Point. It's going to be the year that I do my period acting class. So now I will officially get some training on it. But last year I spent the summer with Dora Shakespeare in Bailey's Harbor, and we did The Merry Wives of Windsor and Henry V, which was so ridiculously fun to work with so many people. Didn't know a single person there. So that was really a beautiful experience. Much like this one where I didn't really know anybody coming into it. So that was just a really great time. But I learned so much last season from just watching these brilliant actors. And I feel very lucky that I had that experience before coming here, because now I could actually, understand what I'm saying without having to like spark notes it. So I mean, I still had to a few times, like there are plenty of things that we all still do. Right. Shakespeare's he's funny like that, he can get you. But yeah, so I had a 3-month run last year. Every night we switched off which show we were doing, which was so crazy. It just became a part of my life. So yeah, and so this is my 3rd Shakespeare show. We did Macbeth at Stevens Point, and that was like the only show at Point I didn't get called back for. So that's shameful. But but I was on the costume crew, which was really fun, and I still learned a lot. So yeah, that's my experience.
Didn't get cast in Shakespeare at Point. Well, look at you now. Take that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, my experience with Shakespeare was mostly just with reading it or watching different film versions of things. My mom was big on us studying that stuff and reading it. Even when we were little kids, she would read the plays to us. I think earliest I remember reading one was I was like 7 or 8. Had no idea what it meant because I was 7 and my brain couldn't comprehend Elizabethan English. But then my mom would read stuff to us. She'd explain it to us, and then we'd watch eventually, when Much Ado About Nothing came out. That was our big one. And we liked all the Kenneth Branaghs. And my mom was a diehard Mel Gibson fan before he went crazy, or at least when he was hiding his craziness. So she really liked his version of Hamlet. So we saw that when we were kids. And yeah, so that was like my intro to it. And then my first Shakespeare was last year doing Midsummer. with play-by-play, and then doing that again earlier this summer, and then doing this show. So that's been a lot of fun. And I don't have the college background with the going to do plays for Shakespeare, but I did a couple when I was in college way back when. There were just little local productions, and I think the one actual play we did that wasn't written locally was Dancing at Lunasa, and that was kind of cool. So yeah, that's my Shakespeare stories.
Love it. Well, that Much Ado film is great.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's a fantastic film interpretation of that play, in my opinion.
I would love to do that show, but I would just be trying really hard to be Dogberry and do Michael Keaton's part the exact same way, and just be a raging crazy, maybe drunk constable. I absolutely love him in that. My favorite.
Well, Much Ado is the perfect segue for my story. Thanks, Will.
You're welcome.
Actually, I fell in love with Shakespeare. I was like in middle school, and it was seeing my brother perform with the Atlanta Shakespeare Company in Much Ado About Nothing. He was Benedict, and it was amazing. And even though they were all in Elizabethan costumes when the Atlanta Shakespeare Company started, it was just a, ragtag band of actors, merry men, but there were women. Anyways, and they would do it in this bar called Manuel's Tavern. And so even though I was like definitely not of drinking age, sure, come see the show. But it was great because you were just right there. Like they were just feet away from you as far as the table. So it was a very engaging, immersive experience. And even though even though I was like in middle school, yeah, sure, I probably couldn't understand the words exactly, right? Elizabethan English, but you could tell the story. When you see it live, it's just so incredibly engaging. And in that environment, it just was fantastic. And so I always loved Shakespeare because of that. And then I would see Kenneth Branagh's, I saw Much Ado About Nothing that he produced and directed, and Henry V, and yes, Hamlet with he who we shall not mention again on here. But but honestly, the first time I've ever performed Shakespeare was last year in Midsummer. And yeah, that was the first time I actually was in a Shakespearean production.
I don't think
so. Yeah. So Peter Quince was my first role, and then and now Baptista. So once again, mind blowing as a female playing a male role last year, and this time the total switcheroo of making Baptista a straight out woman.
Yeah. Which we're really good with the segues, because that's actually one of my other questions. So like last year it was Peter Quince and casting, well, not just Peter Quince, but all the casting, and I casted that gender identifying actor as the gendered character, because I thought it was very important to keep it true to the script. When it comes to gender bending characters with Shakespeare, I'm not a purist necessarily, because I cut the induction from Shrew. A purist would never. But I do think you have to do it carefully. You can't just change characters because you want to. Because if you do, it changes their interaction with other characters. It changes the meaning of the play and all of that stuff. And so to do it just very purposefully. So like with Midsummer, we're casting women as men. Great. That's like what Shakespeare did, but opposite. Cool. And I think that's great. we did that this year too. I think that's so much fun considering a majority of the plays don't have a lot of female characters anyway, especially this one. There were two.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. There were only two.
Just the sisters.
Just the
Wow.
Right? Which when you actually stop and think about it.
That's pretty profound, actually, when you stop and think about that. The layers of Shakespeare. I mean, that is very interesting.
Yeah. Which is why I thought about, even before we had auditions, I was thinking about making Baptista the mother instead of the father. Only because I thought it would add an interesting dynamic. Because you look at, yes, it's the sisters in this male-dominated world. Well, what if it was this family of women in this male-dominated world? And it's two different generations, right? Because even if it's the matriarch still is acting in accordance to the patriarchal society, right? So it was a very purposeful reason for wanting to make Baptista a mother instead of a father, which I thought injected some nice life into it. So that's my reasoning for it. How did you feel about having that, changing it?
The switcheroo?
Yeah.
I found it what I found it interesting was, instead of perhaps the traditional interpretation, or kind of like when you just read it or see certain productions, it's very much it's just business, but then the Bianca and Catherine are so just property, right? And so it just kind of focuses on, I don't know, it just defaults to that very limited viewpoint of maybe what what it's all about, as opposed to how you described it, as far as a couple just really wrestling to get to know each other and falling in love, and what it takes for certain personalities, how they fall in love. So I feel like when that was, as a father, in that traditional viewpoint, it's definitely just, I'm just doing business to sell my daughters off. Whereas with the mother, I'm like, okay, this is, like you and I dialogued about, like, okay, so this is the societal construct that I've had to, for whatever reason, without my husband now, I've had to work my way in, and I do have all this wealth and this power, yet I'm still, but I'm still a woman. And so I still have to negotiate. So there's this edge for me, yet there's that line that I took as a mother, when the special thing is obtained, that is her love, for that is all in all. Like, I push back on Petruchio, like, no, this is not just a business exchange. I know I need to have my daughter married. I know that's the world we live in, but I'm going to make sure not just Bianca gets taken care of, but my daughter, Kate, that Kate actually falls in love with you. And I love at the end of that scene, when he and I are negotiating, that is the one and only time, at least in the version that you created, in the edited version that you gave, that was the only time I called her Kate.
Yeah, and Will and I talked about that, because we were like, well, why does he call her Kate? Well, because Baptista literally just called her Kate. So it's that, okay, that's her, like, what her family calls her. So
yeah,
I'm going to call her what her family calls her.
Yeah. And I felt like it was already, like, I could see, as a mother, I could see in him, like, he might be strong enough for her, because everyone else in Padua ain't got it.
Yeah.
Maybe he's got it, you know? It's kind of like, I know Bianca will be fine. She falls in love at anything. But Kate, I knew, was not going to.
Gotta have my daughters taken care of. Here, Scott, lovely Scott. What about the widow? Yes, Scott, you're correct. The widow is a female character. However, to be fair, she just pops up at the end. Not to diminish her, but in the, like, how everything plays out, right? She's not there with the main driving action. It is just centered around the sisters.
Mhm.
But yes, Scott, you're correct. There are 3 women. The widow, who even when she marries is still called the widow.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about that too, but I was like, nah, that she doesn't even get a name.
No, she's just the widow.
The widow.
Yep. Yep.
It turns out like that's actually her name. The widow.
The widow.
Widow, comma the.
So we have Baptista completely shifting from a father to a mother. But now we have Katie playing Tranio, who we did keep as a man. Love a good pants roll. I do, they're great. But what's different is that you also, so you're playing man, Tranio, but then also playing a second man.
Yes.
Kind of like 2 men.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
How was
Which
that?
I loved it. I loved it. You look at, so if you look at the only female roles in the show, the 2 daughters, it's, they're not,
And the
well,
widow.
I wouldn't say they're not comedic. That what?
We can't forget the widow. Scott.
And the widow, right? But I just look at what is a fun, especially a fun comedic role, which Tranio is, and I really enjoyed playing that role. There was nothing. Oh, am I here? Okay. There was nothing. My computer went black. There was nothing specific to, Tranio's not falling in love or anything. He's kind of, posing, courting someone. So it's really easy to slip into and more fun to slip into that comedy. So I felt like the gender wasn't particularly important, but what I really liked was that it opened up to me. I think about just myself. Ever since I was a kid, you're watching plays or movies, and the roles that I wanted to play were usually male parts because they were the funny parts. They were the fun parts. They got to do the great stuff. And, the female parts weren't particularly super interesting to me. And in this case, like if I were to do this again, I would want to play Tranio again. I really enjoy Tranio. He's so cool and so much fun.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to do that, and great that it is an opportunity for a female. You don't have to be a guy to have this fun comedic role.
Mm-hmm. I love Tranio, and I feel like that character almost gets overlooked a little bit because
Totally.
it's so easy to just go to the lovers, the suitors, Kate Petruchio, and Grumio, and like all that stuff. Like you have those 2 very set groups of characters, and you kind of forget about Tranio.
Yeah, and he's at a really interesting spot because he's clearly very smart, very confident, very gutsy. I mean, this is majorly gutsy what he does, and he can pull it off, and he can switch, and he can go along with this minute by minute as things change. And then you get to the end, and Kate has her speech about, what is a good husband, and that you're going out and you're working hard, and you have Tranio watching this, who sort of is the only servant who has literally filled the place of his master. He's seen how he has been treated differently, how they behave differently, the different privileges that they get, and knows the insight to what their life is really like, what day-to-day life for Hortensio probably is, and does know what day-to-day life is for Lucentio. And so he gets to hear all of this with this insight, and really has the inside look that I think the other servants didn't get. And I think he's really, he's really tuned into that, and like just he has that intelligence, and then he's seen the inside, and I think he totally comes back sort of with a different view. And listening to Kate's speech, then I viewed it a completely different way myself, hearing it through Tranio's ears, having just been his master for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And I also just want to say visually, you and Andy opposite of each other is just hilarious because you're like you're at least 16, if not 18 inches shorter. Like, it's just so awesome.
Well, so here we have a question from someone that we all know. Did you decide on doing Tranio as a pantsil before or after auditions? Great question. After.
Oh.
It was one of those. So going through, I knew I wanted to switch step, and then I knew I wanted Kate as written and Petruchio as written. Same thing with Gremio and Hortensio. Needed them. I wanted them as written. But then for the other roles like Tranio and our other pants role, Grumio, and our servant Curtis, that was all just open. It could be go either way. Same with Biandello, could have gone either way. But I think I remember trying to cast it, Biandello and Tranio were kind of the hardest ones to figure out because, like Teresa, like you said, the look really helped. Like it really helped. And trying to figure out, okay, well, which one would work better as a pants role? Biandello or Tranio. And I feel like Biandello also would have worked as a pants role. And they both could have been pants roles, but it didn't happen. I didn't have that in my head until after auditions. And then once I figured out, so Andrew will be Lucenzio, we got that. Then it was kind of working around him because we have to pair him with both Biandello and Tranio, but most Tranio. So then once we had that, I was like, oh my God, Katie. It's like, she could have been absolutely hilarious. Also having worked with you before, I was like, okay, she can do it. She loves this. She's got this. But Tranio has a lot to do. You gotta have stamina. Or good old Tranio.
Yeah. Tranio's the workhorse, man. He just, whatever you throw at him, he's there. He's ready. So.
But just like the trench coat.
Oh, that coat.
Mary's question reminds me of the importance theater people don't realize how important it is to cast well.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all been in shows, most of us, when it's not cast well and when it is. And you did a wonderful job, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it took a while. Well, also because we extended auditions because of just things in the world and, wanting to be respectful and everything. And also just wanting to make sure we could do it. So our audition deadline, our video audition deadline kept getting extended. So it seemed like the process for casting took a lot longer. But it was tricky. It was hard to make sure it was cast correctly. Because there was a brief moment when I was like, okay, well maybe Baptista should be a father. But then doing that change completely screwed everything else up. And I was like, no, I can't do it that way. Okay. Constantly shifting back and forth. But thank you so much. That means a lot because casting's hard, especially Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Little thing there.
I know this guy.
You know him.
Do you? Does he look familiar?
Yeah.
To hear you talk about the challenges of mounting a production during COVID from both an actor's and a director's perspective. Yes. And I'm glad you asked this. Otherwise, I was going to. I would love to hear from you guys what you thought of Zoom rehearsals. Because I could, obviously being the director, very different experience because I was giving the blocking. I wasn't getting the blocking and having to practice it by myself. So how that was Zoom rehearsals for you?
Well, I'll say Zoom, I think it worked better than I expected to a point. It was good for running our lines and getting that down. And it was good for you giving blocking. I've worked with other directors as well that you basically start that they're like, this is your blocking, go here, go there. But then you're supposed to actually do it and see if it works. And we didn't get that part. And I didn't fully realize until doing this production the actual theater happens when we put it on our feet, and I do feel like any show you could probably take a week or two on Zoom just to get your blocking and your lines down, but you have to be in person, you have to be in the space, and you have to be able to work and collaborate together. And that was something we really couldn't do as much of. We were able to talk about the show and talk about things, but we really needed that time together in person, which I'm so glad when we did have it, and I really, really missed it when we didn't, I will say. And I will just say COVID period, I found it really difficult to focus. It was excruciating trying to learn my lines. Just also because of COVID, my professional, my personal life everything was so much more difficult and took so much more time. I wasn't able, it was all I could do to get to rehearsal. Whereas I think about my rehearsals last year for Midsummer. I was done with work by 5, time to eat, time to go over my scenes and get to rehearsal. And this year it was all I could do to get logged in. And I'm like, what scene are we doing? Because life with COVID is just so much more demanding. So everything around the show was difficult. And then just trying to focus and learn your lines was more difficult. So that's my perspective.
It's a great perspective.
Yeah. For me, well, I mean, Shakespeare's comedies are inherently very physical. There's a lot of, silly things going on, little pranks being played that really take a lot of planning in person. And when we were behind the screen during, just the read-throughs and stuff like that, it was super hard to try and create something physically, obviously. And so that having that week of in-person rehearsals was so important to just not only be able to figure out what your character needed physically, but also how to interact with others. And it was just a super interesting layer on top of that to have to be pretty much 6 feet apart. I'm pretty sure like the only time people got within 6 feet were Will and I. And that can be, kind of within 6 feet, but we did our best. And I think it was definitely a challenge, but I think we learned so much, and we kind of had a little breakthrough of how to work through Shakespeare on the internet. I think it went super well.
Carolyn prepared so well, so rehearsals were well done on Zoom, and then all the actors seemed to really dispense with any other stuff they wanted to do. When we got together, we really put in the work and didn't worry about egos or anything else. We just did the work, and I think kudos to everybody.
Yeah.
I think that definitely, like you said, is that when we actually were together without the ego, that's a huge thing. Is there was just a sense of collaboration, and also I think a great sense of relief to finally just get together. Because I know for me, most of the show didn't quite click until we were in person. I can study lines over and over and over and over again, but it's kind of like when I was in school, I needed to be in class to learn, and I could never cram for tests. I never studied for tests because I just couldn't kind of download the information again. I needed to absorb it in person, and that's just how I learned. So it's the same with theater for me. I learned by doing, and therefore that was just very difficult for me. And I felt like I made massive jumps from that Monday to that Friday. I just felt so much more comfortable doing the scenes, going from being mostly on book to being off book by the time we did the show, and getting most of my lines right.
That's all.
It goes into this question, right? Did you feel extra pressure at all with only 1 week live in person together?
Yes.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like all of that is still playing off the same thing. I don't think I realized how much of a kinetic learner I am when it comes to acting. Like I develop my character as we figure out blocking and all of that stuff. And like usually a good, by the time, usually, you're off book a couple of weeks. And by that time, like, I'm walking around in the shoes my character will be walking on, and I'm standing and this and that. And like, we couldn't do that until last Monday, a week ago.
Yeah.
Lord,
Yeah. Our first.
Jesus is real. That's all I'm going to tell people. Because last Monday from yesterday,
Yeah.
Jesus is real.
Yeah. Our first live
Honestly.
rehearsal was last Monday.
And it was just so like, and then there was also just the reality of, I mean, my job already, I work remotely and I'm usually me, myself, and my cat every day.
Yep.
And so then it's like, wait, there are people, don't come near me. Oh my God, there are people. Like just, it was just a lot at first. Right. Yeah. So, but then at the same time, how cool, I do feel like it was so cool. This does go back to the casting, the combination of people that you've already worked with that you can trust, who really care, and who really bring it their all. And it seemed like the majority of new folk are all currently studying theater and in the throes of their craft, which is an amazing energy as well to have when you're like, when you're not in that environment. So it was really something awesome that just happened when we had to be physically together. But I do appreciate how hardcore you and the art director were as far as masks, shields, and the hand sanitizer and staying away from each other. I mean, just constantly interrupting even our blocking to keep us further away from each other, right? Like
because we're so used to just getting really close to people. I'm like, you're too close.
Yes.
We don't know how to act with each other. So yeah, it was. The pressure was. Holy crap! Was the pressure there? Mary, Jesus is real.
But one thing I will say about having 1 week in person is, yes, it was super challenging, but I also feel like it helped us as actors listen so much more because we weren't on autopilot. That's something that I totally do when you're in like rehearsal for like 2.5 months. It's like you just go on autopilot, you like black out on stage. And in this, you did not have the opportunity to do that. So it's like when I went on stage for my final monologue, I was like, that's a long, hefty monologue. And I really had to be aware of everything I was saying, because if I wasn't truly in the moment thinking about it, I would have forgotten what was coming next. So I honestly think it helped in some ways too, though, which is interesting.
Totally. And I want to circle back as far as all the weeks on Zoom. And Katie, you mentioned about this, how the rehearsals gave us so much time to talk about it. I feel like, especially because, to bring Shakespeare to life, and it was non-traditional. We didn't do Elizabethan costumes. The element of contemporary, whatever. I can't say the word. Contemporizing it. I feel like if we didn't have those weeks of constant dialogue about it, I don't know where our characters would have been. Right? Like it gave us more time to understand the text.
Yeah. What I appreciated about Zoom was that we were able to focus a lot more on discussion, which I think we wouldn't have had as much of if we were in person sooner. I mean, I know for Midsummer last year, we still had discussions and all that stuff, but it wasn't as in depth as what it was with Shrew. And so from my perspective, I loved having that, because that's where I geek out. Dissecting Shakespeare and figuring all that out and making sure that all of the actors knew who they were and knew what they were talking about, understood everything in the situation. Because when we did meet in person, and there were like blocking issues and, people walking slowly, because again, we forgot how to walk and interact with people. However, regardless, I never had an issue with you guys not understanding. like you came in and you knew the words, which is different from being memorized. But like, right, you knew them. You knew the play. You knew what you were saying, and it just was so clear. And usually, that's one of like the last things that you're trying to get out of people. But it was already there because of all the work we did on Zoom with it. So that was a plus for Zoom for me. Giving blocking was tricky when I shared my screen of my little stage outline at the mouth and was like, okay, you're going here and you cross there.
And one interesting thing with the 1 week and the intensity and the focus we all had to have, Michelle noticed as anybody was out in the audience that we were being projected onto the screens behind us. Everybody was backstage. The sun was projecting. She said, nobody was screwing around back there. Nobody. It's like, no, we had to focus so hard. So it just looked like a bustling city behind everybody else. So that, fortunately, that worked out well.
Yeah. No, there was a moment I was slightly worried. I was like, oh my gosh, you can see them. But no, they were just standing. And I think it was the moment where Kate and Hortensio did the scream backstage, which, by the way, is not in the script. That was an addition. But I think, Emily, it looked like you actually like kind of charged into him a little bit. And we could see the silhouettes. It was great.
I am so happy to hear that because, like, in order to get like even slightly an accurate sound out, I kind of did mime, hitting him, and God, it's a good thing that I did that because you could see. So
we could see it. Here's another question. Oh, from Dawn. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Dawn.
What energy did you feel from a masked audience?
I felt actually pretty good about the audience. I know the first show we had already talked about, it was a little slower getting coaxing a reaction at first, at least for me, because I think it was probably because of the masks and everybody's like, we're outside, but we're by people and there's COVID everywhere. But no, like as they kind of got comfortable with the idea that, oh, we're at a show, they like loosened up and they gave us good energy back, and that was nice. Definitely felt even more in the second show because I think that's when we in the show kind of hit our stride and we were more comfortable. We were like, okay, this worked. Like,
okay, we know what to expect now.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, yeah, we ran through the show. Nobody spontaneously combusted. Nothing fell apart. Everything worked like it was supposed to. We didn't have like any mask issues, and like the crowd was able to read what we were doing. And I think once we saw that happen, that at least for me, I felt twice as comfortable at least the second time through, because I just felt more confident in what we were trying to do. And the audience definitely, I think, helped a lot with that. They were definitely.
I think the audience also had a challenge being socially distant because used to sitting next to somebody and, oh, did you see that? Did you hear that? And suddenly they're 6 feet apart and it's a whole different experience.
Yeah, you can't do any like little aside comments.
Right. And like and it's always great. I mean, one of the things when you're in a smaller, more intimate theater, right? Like one person with that one great laugh will just start a whole chain reaction. And we couldn't really have that outside with being socially distant and the masks and the sunglasses and like hats because the sun and everything. So it was like, who is that masked audience member who I think they're enjoying the show? It was a little odd, but then at the same time, I don't know. Then again, it does just challenge you, right? As an actor, what is it about? Like you want them to enjoy the performance, but it's not, I don't know, kind of forces you to rise up your own energy because you just get so excited. There was that moment of when I first came on stage and with my first line, and I was like, oh my God, there's people here. Like, I'm so nervous. I'm freaking out. So it was this weird combination at that 3:00 show. So
Yeah, and it was a good show. It was a really good show. That they were both great. The 3 o'clock was very good as well. And considering it was the first time that we performed in the space with our costumes, with our props, with sound,
Yep.
all
Yeah.
together. The
Yeah.
very first time was that 3:15 show.
And an audience.
And first time with all of that together, and it went.
I actually feel, yeah, I feel like because of doing all the Zoom stuff and having it have to be that we basically had to provide our own energy, regardless of anybody else's response. I think that kind of prepared us for a masked audience and maybe a smaller audience. I mean, because like last year when we did Shakespeare in the Park, there were 1,200 people. This year, significantly smaller because it had to be. So for me, at least, I thought that helped me prepare for an audience that might not jump up and down or might not be as responsive because they're also trying to, they're wearing masks and trying to like not be big and loud and
new experience for them too.
But yeah, it was interesting for me to see that and then kind of be like, oh, I'm not really fazed by any of this because I was so used to I'm sitting in my chair doing my lines to a screen. So there was like this impersonal thing to just have anybody present was really nice.
Yeah.
Oh, people are here. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
And they didn't throw things, so that was really good.
Scott, does this
One person threw things.
to want to do this again?
Kate.
Well, I hope we don't have to. I hope COVID goes
I
away.
hope we don't have to do it exactly like this. I mean,
Yeah.
But honestly, this gave me hope for future
Yes.
productions to go about it this way. My entire season this semester at school is going to be online, and this makes me feel a little more motivated and content with the idea that that's how things are going to go. So honestly, I thought, Carolyn, you did a beautiful job of directing us in such an extraordinary time. So amazing. And I would totally do it again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would hope we wouldn't have to do it exactly this way. But, like you said, hope for the future, because I'm sure it will be this way, the foreseeable future.
Right? I think both this and then when we filmed Midsummer, I mean, being in front of a live audience is always like, that's why we love live theater, right? But again, I love that we're forcing, the one blessing, I suppose you could say, in the midst of this extraordinary time is it's forcing the next level of creativity.
Yep.
Right? So how do we become more innovative with our craft, and how do we make theater even more accessible to people? As much as we love live theater and the energy we get from that live audience and that experience, there's a lot of folks maybe who would never have that if we didn't also have this opportunity to live stream it, or I don't know, it just forces us to keep stretching out. How do we do this? How do we make theater more accessible? How do you make Shakespeare more accessible? How do you just make it work? How do you, like, as they say, the show must go on. Okay, when people can't get next to each other, how do you do that? Yeah.
Hello, Amanda. Anything you would adjust for the next production?
Aww. Guys, that's my friend Amanda. We've been friends since we're 4 years old. Hi, Amanda. Hi.
Well, I would adjust not having a pandemic.
Yeah, could you take care of that, Carolyn, please?
Yeah, I'll work on it for next time.
Yeah.
So everybody out there, wash your freaking hands and do what you're supposed to so the pandemic ends.
She says hi. Hi back.
Hi. Hi.
If we're taking it just what we have, I don't think, honestly, the way it was directed and portrayal and costumes and everything, I don't think I would have changed anything. We'll see when I watch our archival footage. Maybe when I watch it back. Maybe, ooh. But in the moment, no, I was so happy with everything and what everyone did. And I would maybe get plates that didn't break when Will threw them off the table.
Will.
I cannot
Maybe
unsee
I
that.
would think that.
Literally, when you would hit the grapes and I saw the plate break in half, I was like, this could not be more perfect right now.
Your reaction was so genuine. I loved it. You're like,
I was shocked.
that was hilarious. Yeah, I'm not that strong. I guess. Like, I don't know. I thought that was really fun. But yeah, seeing all the plates shatter, I just kept going, oh no. Now we need 2 plates.
Thank you, Beth. It was a fantastic play. Thank you so much. We loved it. Such very talented people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that this is a really nice place to kind of wrap this up. This was so special because we didn't know it was going to happen. We kept rehearsing without knowing if it was going to happen because plans kept changing. So the fact that we were able to literally pull it together. I mean, we had been rehearsing, of course, but we didn't know where we were going to be, how it was going to be done, and all this stuff. So the fact that we were able to finally present it just made it so special. And the fact that people were so excited to come out to it, that we announced the tickets and we sold out the tickets in a week. I didn't have to do any paid advertising for it, which is great. So I think just so special to know that we can do this safely and that people want it. The arts are struggling, but like Teresa said, you just think of these new creative ways, think outside the box. That's what we're doing. And thank you all for doing the show and everybody else in the cast for doing the show and for doing this little talk back. And thank you to everybody who helped us, donated their time, money, which helped a lot. And also to see the show as well. It just so much. I put in the comments the link to the digital program. So if you haven't checked that out, feel free to head over there, read some bios, director's notes, and there's also a link to donate to further play. But anyway, yes, thank you all so much. To quote Shakespeare, thanks and ever thanks.
Aw, yay.
Thank you, everybody. Stay well.
Stay well. Bye.
Thank you guys.